Can? Let's move on. Very fun question. Actually, this question not very difficult. Anytime you all see bearings, think what? Think of trigo. So what do you learn in trigo? Sine rule, cosine rule, and trigonometry ratio. But remember, trigonometry ratio is only actually also trigonometry ratio and Pythagoras. But remember, trigo ratio and Pythagoras are only for right angle triangles. Okay. So A, B, C, D are on horizontal ground. Blah, blah, blah. Check that they have represented all the information. So you notice that there is information that they give you that is not represented. Where's the information that is given that is not represented? So you all must read the question carefully. I always have students cannot solve the question because the information is given in the question, but you never go and indicate. Which information given in the question is not indicated in the diagram, and therefore you needed to go and indicate? The bearing of 48 degrees from A. B is on the bearing of 48 degrees from A. In other words, this angle over here is 48 degrees. They gave you the information, they never, I don't know, actually I also don't understand why Cambridge, like, what you want to label, you label everything, right? No, you don't label everything. You deliberately label one, leave out one piece of information for what? So that the students will get blindsided and then cannot solve the question. But it's not just Cambridge. Even the PSLE questions, some of them are like that. Very strange. Now, D is due west of A means this angle over here is a right angle. So you also ought to label that. Okay, that kind of information they for sure will not label for you, but you are expected to know. So show that angle BAC is 124.1 degrees correct to 1 dp. Where is angle BAC? BAC is this angle over here. Jada, which triangle do I look at to find this question? To find this angle? ABC, right? And what rule do I use? Why cosine rule? Because 3 lengths and no angle. So it's always cosine rule. So you don't need to memorize your cosine or sine rule, but you must remember the conditions for using them. So 3 lengths, no angle is always cosine rule. And then I think your school got tell you, right, you're expected to write by cosine rule or using cosine rule or whatever. The reason why they ask you to write is because Cambridge has mentioned before in their examiner report, they like to see it. So you just listen to them. So by cosine rule gives me the cosine of the angle. So I find cosine BAC first. Equals to what? If you don't remember, you go and refer to the formula sheet. Okay? B square. Cosine C equals to A square, which is the 2 lengths surrounding it, right? A square plus B square minus C square over 2 A B. So you must remember the application of cosine rule. So this gives me the cosine of the angle. You can simplify this into a fraction. Leave it in the fraction. Do not go and change it to the decimal because you want as accurate a value as possible. So you will notice that this is a negative value. Then some of you get very shocked when you see a negative value here and you think that your answer is wrong. What does negative? Cosine is negative means obtuse angle, nothing wrong. If it's sine and then you get negative, then you should be very concerned. If you are doing sine rule and you get a negative, that means you did something wrong for sure, because a triangle cannot have an angle that is greater than that. So for sine rule, if you see negative, it's wrong. But for cosine, you see negative, it's fine because it's obtuse angle. And in fact, you should know that here it must be negative. And therefore, angle BAC equals to cosine inverse. Please remember to write the bracket. A lot of you don't write the bracket when you are using sine or cosine trigonometric functions. By right, you need to make sure you put the bracket. And what you should have done here is just left the answer as it is, instead of like what I did here, and I have to go and key the whole thing over again. I always like to write at least the 2 dp value or 5 SF value. Either one is fine. Then you tell me 1 dp. Okay, Cambridge, I mentioned before a few times to you all, Cambridge is quite particular about the way you all present accuracy. So if they ask you correct 1 dp, you must show me at least the 2 dp value first. Okay? So actually I shouldn't put 5 SF here, I should put 2 dp. So Cambridge has mentioned before, they want to see this. So just give it to them. Some of my students will tell me the school teacher tell them, you see 3-mark question in Trigo usually is what rule? Cosine rule. Because your cosine rule question typically application is 3 marks. Okay. Let's move on. Calculate AD. Where is AD? AD. Sorry? Due west, due east means perpendicular to your north. Due south means it's 180 degrees. Or south and west and south and east is all 90 degrees. Okay? So now that I found this angle, I will not write the 3S, the 1 dp value. I'll actually write the more accurate value, which is 124.14, correct? That's the more accurate value, right? I will use the more accurate value. Although in this case, it is perfectly fine to use the 1 dp value, I think. I don't think Cambridge will penalize you, but I wouldn't use it. Now, to find AD, what do I need? Ashwin. You want CD, yeah? If you want CD, then my next question to you will be how to find CD. It is not impossible to find CD, but then you are jumping through many hoops already. Then your 3-mark question becomes like a, is it 3 marks? Yeah, your 3-mark question will become like a 6-mark question or something. 6 marks worth of steps for 3 marks. Not worth it. The what? Find angle CAD. That's the first thing you should find. You can find this angle, right? That's why the 90 degree there is important. So the first thing you need to find is to find angle CAD. And I'm lazy, so I'm just going to copy the diagram to the next page. You can't do that, obviously, but I can deal with it. I don't know why they make you all do use PLDs, but then impose 10 million restrictions on your PLDs, a lot of which are very useful functions. Okay, that one you have to ask your ministry, okay? Don't ask me. Like a lot of very useful apps that I ask students to download, then they will tell me, oh, sure, my DMA doesn't allow me to download anything. Then there was one fine day, the new DMA that you all use, right? One day it decided to block SLS too. It was amazing. My students say, oh, my DMA blocked SLS. Anyway, so first things first, find angle CAD, which is equals to 360 minus 48 minus 90 minus 124.14. And that will give you 97.86 angle sum at a point. You will not be penalized for not writing the reason, but I always tell students, make it a habit to write reasons for all angles that you find. Now, once I have this angle, this is just a prelude, right? Actually, which is the actual angle that I want to find? It is not this angle. Which is the actual angle I want to find? I want to find angle ADC. Why? Which rule do I want to use? I only have one length, right? If I only have one length, actually, which rule do I want to use? Sine rule. And for me to use sine rule, therefore, I need to find the corresponding angle. So I know that AD corresponds to this angle, right? But my 280 corresponds to which angle? It corresponds to here, what? So that is the actual angle that I want to find, because I want to use sine rule. And how do I know that I want to use sine rule and not cosine rule? Because I only have one length. Okay? Because I only have one length, so I would suspect that I need to use sine rule. All right, that is the whole point here. So once I find CAD, I can now go and find angle ADC, which is 180 minus 32 minus 97.86 to give me 50.14 degrees. Anyway, when you're in doubt, when you're solving trigo questions, remember, it's generally speaking either sine rule or cosine rule. So ask yourself what information can you find to help you to either apply sine rule or cosine rule, and ask yourself what are the conditions or limitations of using sine and cosine rule. You remember the conditions, then it is easier for you to figure out which rule you need to use. A lot of you get stuck because you cannot remember the conditions when to apply cosine rule versus when to apply sine rule. Okay, so now that I found the angle, that is actually the angle that I want. So by sine rule, then please remember sine rule application, I was scolding my sec 3s for it because they made life very difficult for themselves. Sine rule application, you can put the angle on top, or you can put the length on top. What should you put as the numerator? You put whatever you want to find. I have students put the angle on top, then they put the length below, and then when they cross multiply, somehow, some way, they cross multiply wrongly. Okay, so please, you want to find length, you put AD on top. AD corresponds to which sine? Sine 32 degrees, right? Then your AC, which is 280, correspond to which? Correspond to sine 50.14 degrees. So that is your application of sine rule. Okay. And I should not be laughing, but so AD equals to sine 32 degrees times 280 out of sine 50.14 degrees. I see some of you are already done. Very good. Please don't go and simplify. I don't know why a lot of students hand very itchy, like to go and simplify into numerical values. No, you should just press the whole string into your calculator. So bracket, okay, I forgot the bracket here. Oops. Bracket sine 32 degrees. Bracket 280 out of sine 50.14 degrees. What do you get? You get 193.2. I will always put 5SF first, 0.30. Then I round off to 193, which is your 3SF value. If the question never specified, then leave in 3SF, right? Standard. But the reason why I put in 5SF first is because very often you need to use the value. And if you need to use the value, then you should use the more accurate value, which is your 5SF value. Or minimally your 4SF value. You don't have to do 5, you can do 4. But not 3. 3SF value not acceptable for working step. It's only acceptable for answer. Okay. Next. Okay, so data, I see you got question C already. What triangle do I need to draw first? Which triangle do I need to draw? So you need to draw the triangle ATC, right? Because point A is the base of a vertical mast AT. And the angle elevation from C is 34 degrees. So I need to draw the vertical. You must know what is the correct vertical. The vertical is AT. Where is point A? Point A is like that, okay. So A is the base. Do not label the triangle wrongly. A is the base. Why? Because A is on the flat ground. So the mast, well, they call it AT. T is the top of the mast. And then A is connected to C. And AT, because it's vertical, forms a right angled triangle. We have the length of AC. They tell me angle or elevation of T from C. Anyway, they say T from C. If it's the same ground, then there's no angle or elevation. It's 34 degrees. Sometimes they don't say angle or elevation. Sometimes they say angle or depression. What must you remember about angle or elevation, angle or depression? Angle of elevation is always angle of elevation is always equal to your angle of depression. Why? Alternate angles. Where will angle of depression be? Angle of depression will actually be this angle. A lot of you draw your angle of depression wrongly. You draw it here. No. Angle of elevation, remember, is always equal to angle of depression. Don't ever forget that. It's by alternate angles, yes. So this is the triangle. You want to find the angle of elevation of T from B. So, Jada, what's the other triangle I need to draw? ATB, correct. In this case, what must be the same? So this is my question mark, right? So these two triangles, what must be the same? Your height of the mast, right? Which is AT. So that's the first thing you need to find. You need to find AT. Because we already had AB, right? AB is given as 175. So we need to find the mast, the height of the mast. So AT, this one, any question that involves angle or elevation and angle or depression, etc., is always by what? It's always by trigo ratio. Don't ever need to use sine or cosine rule 1. Why? Because you got angle or elevation, it is always a right angled triangle. Okay, so you always use trigo ratio. So trigo ratio, what do we know? I have opposite, I have adjacent, I use tangent. So tangent 34 degrees equals to opposite, which is AT, over adjacent, which is 280. And therefore AT is equal to 280 tangent 34 degrees. If you want to evaluate this, then you will go and find it in 5SF or 4SF minimum. I advise students actually not to bother evaluating this and just leave it as 280 tangent 34. But I think a lot of you don't like to do that. You would like to go and evaluate it. If you would like to evaluate it, please leave at least 4SF. For me, I will always give 5SF. Once I have this, then I have AT ready, right? So the right side is same thing. So the angle elevation here is your angle TBA. And it's opposite, which is AT, right? So now I have my AT. I have my adjacent also, which is 175. And therefore, angle TBA is just tangent inverse. Angles, remember, is not 3SF, it's 1dp. And the important thing to remember about angles, angle units is never given for you at the O level. So please remember to write the unit, don't lose unit mark. Angles is literally the only thing that can lose you units marks because it's never given. All the other units are given except angles. Why? I explained before. Because angles can also be measured in radian. So because it can be measured in radian, they don't penalize students who go and find the angle in radian instead of degree for whatever weird reason. Okay, but as a result of that, they don't write the unit for you, because if I write degree and you give your answer in radian, then I will have to mark you wrong. So angle units are not given. Please go and make sure you write. Okay? Yay, we are at the halfway mark. Rejoice. Or we are only at the halfway mark, depending on how you want to look at it. Also, I find Cambridge very weird. You give me so much empty space down here for what? Why you cannot make the answer blank go lower? By the way, all this empty space can be used one. If you have questions that you run out of space, you want to refer, you can tell them refer to this page. They will allow it. That's how you are supposed to use the empty space. In fact, at the back of your paper, I don't know whether they got print. No, they don't print the empty space here. They do not give you full scan. Please don't be like one of my idiot students. Okay, I'm going to call him an idiot. You know what he did? He wrote extra workings. He wrote extra, so he cancel, so no space, right? He went to do it he asked for a paper from the examiner. The extra paper that you ask from the examiner is always for rough working. They do not attach it back to your answer booklet. What do they do with the rough paper after they collect it back? They crush it and they throw it away. Okay, he did the questions on the rough paper. You all don't do stupid things. Okay? That in your actual exam paper, don't ask me how I have the actual exam paper, but in your actual exam paper, one day police will knock on my door. I don't know what you're talking about. Lots of people have them. It's not just me.
So you're gonna bring them all down with you?
They will always give you blank page. The blank page is for you to do if you got question, you cancel until you got no more space, you do it on the blank page. Not go and do it on extra paper. By the way, these days also a bit different. You can request for this thing called an additional answer booklet. For some of your subjects, there's an additional answer booklet. So the answer booklet has a barcode so that it can be scanned along with the your actual answer booklet. So that's what they do for the language-based subjects. You can request for an extra booklet. The booklet will come in the booklet form. Like you run out of space in the actual answer booklet, right? You request for an additional booklet. Yeah, but math don't have extra answer booklet one. So if you need the question, you see all the blank spaces here, you are supposed to do them on the blank spaces and the blank pages. Okay, please don't do stupid things. Like do on rough paper so that they can crush and throw it. Now, I'm going to go through one more question, then I'll give you a break.